Hello there.
Hello. Oh, goodness. Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is 7:01 and the committee members are here, so let's get started. I call this meeting of ANC's Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee meeting to order. Good evening. I'm Zach Gold, chair of this committee and commissioner representing SMD 1C05. Before we begin, because we have a dozen or so participants, I just want folks to know that beginning on or about tomorrow, and given the weather, I'm going to assume it's not tomorrow, the 16th Street bus project coming to our neighborhood at 16th and Columbia and Harvard is expected to begin. So maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And there will be pedestrian detours and vehicle barriers on 16th Street here in our neighborhood while DDOT begins excavations related to the 16th Street bus lanes. Oh, again, for those who aren't following, that is construction is starting this month, and it's set to be completed from I believe it's Arkansas Avenue to H Street Northwest at the beginning of next year. So something to look forward to. With that, let's get started. We have 4 items on tonight's agenda. The first is a presentation on Move DC, then a presentation from the Festival Center on its BZA variance request. Then we have consideration of a resolution on potential cuts and changes to WMATA service. And finally, a presentation from the Business Improvement District on a potential for a cherry blossom festival sculpture. Ms. Rupert, you have the floor and you should have access to share your screen for our Move DC presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Just make sure I'm doing this right.
Looks good.
Oops. Like, where's the presentation button? Yep, I did. Down here. Sorry. Here we go.
There it is.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me join your ANC Commission meeting on planning and transportation. I'm also very excited for the 16th Street project, so I'm glad it's moving ahead. As Commissioner Gold said, my name is Leslie Rupert and I work at DDOT. I'm on the state and regional planning team within the department. So probably everybody on this call knows what Move DC is, but I will just take a moment to touch base on what we're talking about. Move DC is DDOT's long-range transportation plan. It sets our vision for 25 years looking to the future, and it really is used to guide and prioritize our investments. The first Move DC was established in 2014, and this is actually our first update to it. So it's been a pretty exciting experience. And I'll just be sure to note that this is a federally required document, but we really see it as an opportunity also to talk to the public about our long-range goals and hear back about how we're doing. So how does Move DC affect all of us? It helps influence how we make decisions about public transit, the bicycle and pedestrian amenities across the district. The goal is to improve traffic, or reduce, by improve I mean reduce traffic congestion, improve our air quality, and help us implement our programs more equitably. And really, I think you're probably very familiar with a lot of what we do is making trade-offs about how to make sure we're using the public space the best that we can. So it informs those decisions. As I mentioned before, this is our first update to Move DC. So we started last summer internally with the consultant group of figuring out how to do this. And I feel like I've been working from home so long, I kind of forgot. But with the pandemic was also impacting how we do public engagement. So we also had to regroup on how we were going to do that at the beginning of the contract period. So looking back to last fall, that was our first round of public engagement. And we tried to utilize all the tools that we had available to us, and definitely will look forward to in-person meetings in the future. But we had a virtual town hall. We maintained some open telephone hours, of course, used social media. We also put flyers up around the district and utilized a survey, which was our biggest impact outreach device. And we're utilizing a lot of the same options this round as well. So speaking of the survey really focused on our goals and policies, as well as the equity statement. And we received over 4,000 responses to the survey, and overall received really good feedback on our policy statements. The average score of 4.2 on how people rated them, which kind of gave us a general sense that we're headed in the right direction with the policies that we have. One of the last screens in the survey from last fall focused on, or asked respondents how they would allocate 10 coins across the different modes. And as you can see, transit received the most funding from the public from the survey's point of view, with bicycling and pedestrian infrastructure following behind that, and then trailing behind that, private vehicles and goods movement. So here we are in February. So this month and next month, we're having another engagement period. We had 2 town halls last week. We're working on cleaning up the video to put that online as well. But the PDF presentation, a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation is available on our website now on the Getting Involved tab. And we're again maintaining office hours every Thursday in February and March at 10 a.m. But you can call us anytime at the number 202-599-7371 and leave a message and we will call you back. A person is also able to take the survey over the telephone if internet access or just a different preference of taking the survey online. So we have that available as well. We are having a district-wide advisory neighborhood commissioner meeting on March 4th. So hopefully many of the ANC commissioners here this evening will be able to join us at that time just to answer any questions as well. And of course, you can email us anytime as well. And the engagement period ends at the end of March, so March 31st. And this round of public engagement is really focused on the strategies and also talking about the updates to the mobility maps that we put out last fall that I'll talk about in just one moment. And also new is the transportation needs maps. And I'll say this again a little bit later, but just to put a point on it. The strategies are the actual actions and commitments that the department's making. We're really hoping to get even more feedback on this more than the goals and policies, which is like higher level. This is like hopefully like super clear of what we're trying to do. So I had mentioned just briefly that this was not included in the survey, but on our website last fall, we had mobility priority maps for transit, bike, and freight. And had the opportunity for anyone to be like, oh, I really like this segment of a bike lane or a bus lane, or I really would like to see you add this. And we got over, I think, 2,000 comments on these maps, which was awesome. And so then we had the opportunity to go through some internal processes of like, how can we incorporate as much as we can from the feedback that we got. And I think Commissioner Gold asked a question about how like where there's overlapping priorities. So I'll keep going through this and then circle back to that if that is okay. One of the things that we created since last fall were the transportation needs maps. And this, we worked with our consultant team to create an index that took proximity to high frequency transit, access to jobs and destinations. And destinations includes grocery stores, the post office, hospitals or medical centers, and where we know that there's safety issues such as gaps in the sidewalk or where our high crash corridors are. Created an index and then put that on a map to show where our greatest needs are. So the darker shades of purple reflect a greater need, and then the lighter the shade, the less the need. And so on our website, you can interact with this map. You can zoom in, and you can also pull in some of the neighborhoods that have, or some of the groups included in our equity statement for race or low income or low English proficiency. So this is kind of circling back to like where we started last fall, the public, and where we are now. Again, and highlights our overall framework for this update to Move DC. We wanted to be able to update the plan in a routine fashion where we're trying to do that every 5 years within a year, and then having annual reports. So we wanted to streamline the framework. And so the overall framework is we have our goals and policies that we focused on last fall for engagement, and then the strategies that we're focused on now, which is our actual, what action we'll take. So the example here is one of our goals is safety, and one of the policies to implement safety is to design transportation infrastructure to improve safety for all, focusing on our most vulnerable roadway users. And one of the ways that we'll do that is implementing at least 20 intersection improvements per year. And then what we'll have to look forward to is in our annual report, we would be counting where we're doing intersection improvements. Where are we reducing where are we like eliminating dual turn lanes, or where are we implementing the leading pedestrian time to cross the street? So with that, I'll circle back to this very quickly for the mobility maps. I do hope everyone's also had an opportunity to check out our website. I'll put it in the chat once I stop sharing my screen. There's a lot of really wonderful resources, and on the resources tab is where you'll find the mobility priority maps, where you can zoom in as well as just read about them. But we added a section on where there are overlapping priorities, such as, well, there's several, but where we know that we are hoping to do some transit improvements as well as bike improvements, and just talk about during the review of the feedback process, we looked at where might there be a parallel option that we could do one versus another and make the network work, but also wanted to leave the flexibility as a project actually goes through project development and we're doing community engagement on a very specific project such as 16th Street bus priority lane. Giving the opportunity at that time too to see like what other design tools do we have available to us to make sure that we're maximizing the space for all modes, because a lot of what we do is maintaining that balance. So with that, I'll stop sharing and hopefully be able to see everyone's faces.
Commissioner Gold. Leslie, thank you for that detailed presentation. It was very helpful. I'd first like to see if my fellow Commissioner Faulkner, Commissioner Gold have questions before handing it over to members of the audience.
Thank you for that presentation. I don't think I have any particular questions beyond just I guess, you know, it sounds like there's obviously opportunities for people to interact. And I guess this is, I guess, not so much a question as just, you know, thank you for sharing this. And I hope that people will take the opportunity to fill out the survey and attend, you know, the, you know, upcoming events, so that people can make sure that our neighborhood's input is heard.
Thank you, Commissioner Ronnie. I had a brief technical meltdown, but Leslie, I heard that whole presentation, and I'm really impressed as someone who goes to a lot of meetings. I was very impressed with the presentation that your team put on the other day. The interactive parts of your site are fantastic. So for those in our neighborhood who are interested in this, I really recommend that. I have a very micro observation and then sort of a bigger question about strategy. As someone who thinks too much about this, I've taken the time to zoom in on our neighborhood, and I'm grateful for the future plan to connect some missing sections on the painted bike lane on Columbia Road. Specifically at 16th Street, at Calorama Road, and the intersection with Connecticut Avenue, which I know is part of DDOT's long-term plan for the Connecticut Deckover project. I'll note, however, that your map for the Columbia Road bikeway is incorrect, and DDOT's map is incorrect, and that there are notable gaps in the facility, approximately 270 feet from 16th Street, you know, into Columbia Road, and then almost the entire 1700 block, excuse me, 800 or so feet from Ontario Road to 18th Street is not even covered by a painted bikeway. And I'd appreciate if Move DC and your DDOT colleagues looked into these gaps, as well as took note of this ANC's request at the beginning of the month for a protected bike facility along the entire stretch of Columbia Road.
Yes. I'm just going to say something back to make sure that I understood. At first, I thought you were saying that the map, the way that we have it, it was incorrectly reflecting lanes that are not there.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
You have a solid green line,
Okay.
the entire 1600 to and 1700 blocks, and those are not correct.
Okay. Thank you. We did do QA/QC, but it's not perfect. So thank you for letting me know. I'll follow up to get that corrected.
Sure. And I apologize that I'm having some technical issues, so I hope you can still hear me.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my bigger question is, you know, looking at Move DC's priority routes, and I'm curious about the trade-offs that are required, right? So since we're talking about Columbia Road, DDOT classifies the 1600 to 2000 blocks of that street as a bike priority, which of course this ANC does as well and wishes it was protected. At the same time, Move DC shows that stretch as classified as a transit priority route and a freight priority route. So it'd be helpful to understand what priority route means, and whether prioritizing routes requires any level of infrastructure development. Right, I'm looking at a 50-foot right-of-way minor arterial, and the question is, how can this be a priority for everything, right? If everything's a priority, is anything a priority? That's sort of what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the heart of a lot of our work. So I hear you. I think we didn't want to make decisions. So Move DC is a super high level document. And so we didn't want to make decisions on any given corridor about like how the design will progress at too early of a stage. So where we could make decisions on if there was an alternative route, like totally or exactly adjacent to, like if we knew we wanted a bus route to be a priority on one street and then adjacent to it, sorry, I like tired at the end of the day. And adjacent to it could be a different facility for a different mode, then we could go ahead and explore that now. But we didn't want to make a decision on a road like Columbia Road, knowing that it has a lot of demand on it. And we want to be able to have, the context conversation with the community when we're able to move forward with specific plans on maybe there's a way to balance putting in some bus infrastructure that would improve as well as maintaining safety for a bicycle route too. So it's kind of acknowledging that there are overlapping priorities and making a decision at this high level document where we could, but acknowledging that we can't across the district because there's a lot of competing demands on a lot of streets. I don't know if that gets to your question enough or if,
No, I mean, I think it helps us in a way show where the Move DC plan is in the realm of the rest of DDOT strategy. I would just say that as community leaders, this ANC, as I'm sure other ANCs, would really love to speak specifically with the different task leaders of DDOT so that we can help turn this high level strategy into something that actually creates positive change on the ground in our neighborhood and connecting our streets. So thanks for, if there's good opportunities there, we're happy to engage offline about that.
Yes, I will note that, so if you send, like many ANCs also submitted letters kind of outlining which segments are more important to them. So I'm in the process of hiring somebody that really is focused on Move DC as their full-time job. And so we got 2,000 comments on the mobility maps and 7,000 comments on the survey alone, in addition to emails and letters. So we have gone through to compile all of those comments, and so we don't want to lose any of that information. And so I guess I would just say that we want to know the community leaders' needs, and so we're committed to making sure that all of this information is also farmed out to all the specific projects that are doing, or project managers, excuse me, that are doing project delivery or development on any given road or project. So it's not lost by any means to submit it to Move DC, and we're one department, of course. So making sure that we're communicating everything that we hear with all the people that are directly involved with implementation, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand this off to Commissioner Irani, who will take questions from the community. I'm going to reset my system so I don't awkwardly miss out on anything else. But thank you so much for your presentation so far. Commissioner?
Thanks, Commissioner Gold. Leslie, thanks again. I want to start by taking questions from members of the audience. Commissioner Gold, it sounds like you want to say something there?
No, I'm just resetting.
Just frozen. Okay.
Frozen in time.
All right. Any questions from the community, please hit raise hand or dial *9 if you're dialing in from the phone, using the phone. Okay, not seeing any hands up there.
Can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
Please
I forgot
do,
to say thank you to Commissioner Gold for the kind words. And definitely I'm get to be the face here, but there's been so many people at DDOT that have helped put this together and make those really cool tools. But I'm glad that you like them.
That was excellent. And we'll also, we had put this on the website previously. And I think if it's helpful, we can put the survey also there.
So. Hey, Amir, you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, go right ahead, Gordon.
Hey, Leslie. So my question has to do with the way that you guys are thinking about Move DC. In the time that I have followed all transportation in DC, Move DC 2014, it hasn't appeared as if you guys were rigorously executing what was in Move DC. And so my question is, how are we supposed to take it as, like, how serious are the recommendations? Or is it just supposed to be like, we thought a lot about it, we have this reasons for selecting this road for this purpose, and maybe it won't end up being used, but we just thought about it?
Sure. I think we've had the opportunity of time to learn a lot of lessons from Move DC 2014, which was an incredible document and a very huge effort. To know, to really do some also thinking of like how we're relating this high level long range plan, and as is regulated by the federal government, directly to our program that we're funding with dollars. So in preparation of the update, we looked at how other states do their long range plans, and a lot of them are policy based documents. And so we're definitely a mix of policies and projects, because we have these mobility maps that are really pushing where we want projects to go. But as a policy based document, DDOT's committing to these goals, which I think are probably the goals of any DOT. And then the policies and the strategies that we're actually going to be putting into place. So it's been very important to me and my colleagues, as well as our leadership, that there's a lot of internal conversation just as much as the external conversation of like, what are we committing to and how is that going to be impacting our work going forward? So I hope, I mean, I've been working on it for over a year, so I hope that it's important and that it's meaningful. And I truly believe that that it is our long range plan that's helping inform how we're spending our dollars, which is our dollars as people that live here.
And just a follow up in terms of where the implementation is. So does that mean, so you mentioned the 20 intersection improvement goal. Does that mean the near Northwest safety and mobility study, that's like where you guys would go to the implementation step and actually do, final study and put the things in the ground?
Yeah, that could be an example. Or we have projects that support Vision Zero specifically. So like if there's any like intersection improvements that are specific for Vision Zero implementation. So it's really been a lot of work of internal, like me knowing how my colleagues that are implementing this work, how they know what they're doing so that I can know what they're doing so that we can then report it on an annual basis. So we are getting the infrastructure internally set up so that we can actually track how we're all working towards these bigger picture goals.
Awesome. Are there other questions from members of the community? Any other commissioner questions or comments? Great. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure we'll work together in the future, and we're really glad that you came and are doing this engagement with our community as well as others. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. With that, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Oh, that's good to hear. For those who are not in the chat, that Move DC materials have been passed out in our neighborhood. And that's a great way to engage with folks who are not on Twitter all the time. So that's great. So late last year, the Festival Center presented its renovation plans to this committee. Two of the members of the committee are now new, and thank you for coming back, Bill, now that your BZA variance is being considered. I think it will, it's Shirley and Kyle who will present. Oh, Graham, you got this. Okay, perfect. So you have the floor, go ahead.
So my name is Bill Mefford. I'm the executive director of the Festival Center, and we are fortunate to have, I hope Kyle DeThomas is on. He will lead us, and as well as Shirley Rumble, who is our senior project manager. Shirley and Kyle, are y'all on?
Yes, we are on. Hey, Bill.
Great.
Yeah, and we're glad to be back. Thanks for having us back. Thank you everyone for your time and your attention tonight. I just want to briefly introduce our team. It is varied bunch of all-stars we've assembled here for this project, each with their particular area of expertise. So as we go through our presentation, different people will be driving, and I just want to introduce Shirley, who you've been introduced to, is both the lead contractor for the project, but also the owner's representative, and has been, part of this project since its inception. So has a lot of background and can speak to a lot of different parts of this. We also have Terry Averon, who's the architect for the project. Actually, I can't see in my view everybody that's on, but I assume Terry's on. Who's the architect for the project and will take you through the floor plans, what it looks like now, what the project's gonna make the building look like. And then we have Jamie Milanovic on the line, who's our traffic engineer, who can talk to anything circulation or parking related. And then I have a number of my Ballard colleagues on the line, Katie Noonan, David Guest, and Graham McSweeney. So we're here to field Q&A to talk about the variance requested and any of the specifics that the ANC members or the audience want to get into. So first, I'll pass it off to Shirley to talk about TFC and the need for the project. Shirley?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I just want to say thank you again for your time. We're back again. We'll try to make this straight to the point and providing as much information as we can. I will reintroduce myself again for those who may be new on the call. My name is again Shirley Bouvier-Rumble. I am the CEO of USource. We are the design build contractor and again, senior project manager working with the Festival Center and Bill with this project and this undertaking. As many of you know, the Festival Center has been around for 30 years. It's one of those, I call it the gateway building in a sense. When you're driving right there on Columbia Road, you just can't miss it. And it's been in operations for 30 years. For those who don't know, the Festival Center is made up of social impact organizations that really provide a number of services, be it hospitality, educational, spiritual development. And all of these services are kind of wrapped around in this network of organizations, and all of them are actually nonprofit, which make this project really unique. There are organizations such as School of Liberation, Church of the Savior, also the Adams Morgan Bid, Faith and Money Network. So they've been in existence. They've been, doing what they do. As you can imagine, with the building having been constructed, say, 30 years ago, while they've been doing great work, there've been issues with the building over time. And now, there's a fork in the road, obviously, where you're dealing with building systems that their life cycles are coming to an end, inefficient layout of the interior space, a lot of wasted space, unfortunately. So this is where Bill, as being executive director, and the board members are grappling with how do we manage this. We're losing so much money every year. We're trying to keep up with this mechanical system that's falling apart. So as you can imagine, the building of this age, we're really at the point where there needs to be some real decisions made. So with the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems really deteriorating, there's also a repurposing, sort of Festival Center looking at how do we really expand the services? How do we really create a larger hub, a network that can really be responsive to the social needs of the community, surrounding community as well? And so this is where both the mission aligns with the overall program for the space. And so this is where we're involved in partnering with Bill to say, okay, let's look at how we can really make this space more open, more effective from a configuration standpoint, and also deal with the building operational needs. As you can imagine, the cost to rehab this building is really high. We all know, these costs are absorbent these days. And so the way that the building has been reconfigured really bodes well for the Festival Center and being able to finance the cost of these upgrades and these large, obviously, capital components that are really costly, in addition to the floor plan, reconfigured floor plan. With that said, I just wanted to emphasize why we're here. It's more than just, another development project. We've seen a number of these. This is a purpose behind the building. We call it a meeting place, the people's place, a place that with what's being proposed here will make it that much more impactful for those who will be using it and for the community as well. So I just wanted to leave it there, and I pass it on to, if we want to go ahead with the slides, Graham, are you able to just show the building itself? So for those of you who are familiar, Columbia Road, this is the corner view, Columbia Road, the main entrance here. This is the corner of Mozart and Columbia. Very unique building, as you can see, with that turret in that corner there. And that is the rear of the building. And what makes this project unique as well, this building, is that there is parking, which is very hard to find these days. The number of parking spaces, we've got 15 total, I believe. And so that I think has been very helpful for the nonprofits to work out of here. And this is obviously a site plan that indicates which zone this is, and this is the MU5A zone, which does allow for what's being proposed. But we do need some assistance and relief, and that's what I think Kyle will be able to provide some more information on that.
Great. And then Terry, do you want to drive for a little bit and take us through the property, surrounding area, and the improvements on site? Is Terry on? If he's not, Graham.
I believe Terry may need to be promoted to a panelist.
Can we do that?
I've just unmuted Terry, so he's
right. I think I'm unmuted now.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, I've been watching. I thought, can you hear me? The dog's barking in the background, and all right.
Thank you, Terry.
Sure. And I may have to plug in if the computer runs down right during the course of this. But so to give everybody just a little bit a sense of the site, you all just saw the building in elevation, and it's on the corner, as we said, of Mozart and Columbia Road. The project is not really about expanding a whole heck of a lot. It's already a 3-story building. And if you'll advance the slide a little bit, everybody. Graham, I guess you're in charge of this. You can see just in this diagram that there's parking. Those are the spaces down where it says public alley. There's an access on the very bottom corner to a kitchen. And then the turret you can see is the round thing in the top part of that drawing, right on the corner. Right now the building takes up the majority of the lot itself, except for those parking spaces. So there was not any way to really expand the building, except, and I'll point that out, on the 3rd floor in the course of trying to meet the goals of the Festival Center in terms of reuse of space. If you can advance, Graham, to the next slide. I think Kyle, they'll talk a little bit about the setbacks, but we haven't, right now, the height of the building meets the minimum requirements of 65 feet, and all of the setbacks are meeting the existing things. So the expansion does not in any way ask for any special exception at all, other than on its 3rd floor. And we'll go into that. Kyle might want to address a little bit more about this, but that's not really germane to what we're talking about right at the moment, but they can come back to
I think that's fine. The main takeaway is, the setbacks, the height, none of that's changing, but these things are staying the same.
All right. This might be a little small for you all to see, but basically this is the existing plan. There's an entry in the upper right up near the circle. That's the turret. And right now that entry, one of the biggest changes is that it's a complete energy hog. The doors open out, and not only is it hard to get into the building without falling down the first step, it's a little bit on the dangerous side. So that was one of my early priorities. The other was in terms of looking at the building, these are 16-foot high spaces on the first floor, really tall space and not really well utilized, pretty large office spaces, and then very large bathrooms. But the owners have decided they would really like to have kind of gender neutral bathrooms. The idea that these big, broad, open bathrooms, which are down in that left portion of the drawing, that they would be revised in some fashion. So in the new design, we've moved the bathrooms. And in the very lower left corner is the kitchen area, which is presently hardly serviceable at all. I wish I could expand the drawing for you all so you could see a little bit better, but the kitchen, you get at it from the back, but it's kind of an L-shaped space that's completely unmanageable at this point. And since the Festival Center wants to do things and have teaching classes and a bunch of other functions that will go on with the kitchen and the community, including, I think there's a meals program that they're creating for the homeless, and Bill and Shirley can talk a little bit more about that. But in our redesign, if we go to the next layout for the main floor, we basically reconfigured and try to utilize that space a little bit better. The building itself is an energy hog, as I've said, and in terms of trying to utilize this very tall space, I came up with this idea. The little orange line that's kind of around that section in the lower part, that represents a mezzanine. It's a mid-level space that we're going to create, or hope to create on the first level, just to add about 1,000 square feet to the actual thing for more office space. And that, in the course of doing that, the kitchen gets expanded more into a rectangular form, much more serviceable, and with a space off it for teaching the culinary arts, which is kind of underneath that mezzanine. And the bathrooms were then shifted into individual stall bathrooms, and that's also underneath the mezzanine, over near the elevator on the bottom part of the drawing. All right, so the other big thing, and you can notice it at the entrance, is adding in kind of an airlock. We added a vestibule in order to save the energy of opening the doors and use a sliding door rather than a swing door, so that the access to the front of the building is both energy efficient and easier from a handicap perspective. So for accessibility, it was kind of important. And there's an art component that you can see in that area right there with those little crosses, represent just a display area, because it's really important for the Festival Center to be able to have community-oriented space where different art exhibits and displays can be more accessible to the public. So that was the first floor renovation. This is actually the outline of the office area of the mezzanine that's above, that looks down then on the other spaces. The existing second floor was kind of a traditional office suite layout, very large offices, a long hallway between all the offices, not really conducive in the existing layout to the way that the Festival Center sees itself moving, and really because the mechanical systems are going to all be have to be upgraded. They're just so inefficient that in the course of doing that, they shrunk a lot of the spaces. And this is, I'll show you the new layout in the next slide. They decided, well, there's all this glass on the outside of the building, but it's a fairly deep building, and the light is not. This was, I think, Bill's initial concern. A lot of that light doesn't get to the middle of the building. So what we did in the reconfiguration on the second level was create smaller offices that kind of surround a middle space that we now refer to as the Wild Wild West. Now, whether with COVID that's the appropriate way to deal with it, I'm not quite sure at this point, but that center section was meant to be a place where all of these nonprofit, smaller organizations that might only require 1 or 2 computers, where they can share ideas and share kind of communal understanding of how each of the nonprofits works. And they wanted this area in the middle where everybody could have these kind of ad hoc meetings. And that made a lot of sense in the reorganization and putting the finances into restructuring the building, that they have some of these newer ideas about how companies or the smaller organizations might work. And that's what we did in the layout. Again, shifting the bathrooms in this case into individual gender neutral kind of bathrooms. And the big change to the building was on the 3rd floor, and we'll go to that next. What this shows is the existing layout. It was fairly odd in that the right side of the building, you can see, is office space, the elevator, and 1 stair go to it. But literally there's a stair on the left side, you can see in this image, that in order to get to it, access it from a fire code perspective, you have to leave the enclosed area on the right and go across the roof and then down through the stair. I don't know exactly why that was done. I think it had to do with the zoning consideration 30 years ago when the building was built, in terms of what the 3rd floor could be used for. But when we looked at it, of course, it made a lot of sense that if you were going to expand, to use that roof area and fill between the already existing tall spaces would make a fair amount of sense. And that's, of course, the crux of the variance we're talking about, is adding this space as space. What is that need? Why is that a good thing? And what does it affect? And in the next slide, it kind of shows you what we're thinking about doing. It's adding both office space on the top of the building, filling in, and we'll show you in the elevation, that part on the top where it shows glass and an infill. There's already a kind of a shielded roof we can show you that's along Columbia Road that's in that area. So it looks like a 3-story building currently, and we just filled in what was already there. And on the left bottom corner, we've left an open area that's outside. So it's like a decked area with a roof on top of it, so that a lot of these people have an exterior space to deal with. So that was the crux of the infill that we're doing. And then in the next slide, it kind of shows you, by having 1 roof on the top, as opposed to a series of different roofs, one being on the top of the 2nd floor, one being on the top of the stair, one being on top of the other space, one being that awning thing that's on the front of the building. That made it really difficult in the earlier, the current iteration of the building, to have solar panels. And one of the big concerns of the Festival Center was the energy that the building takes in the first place to operate. And by having 1 continuous roof with all the restrictions on clearances around the edges of the building, et cetera, and around equipment, et cetera, it was impossible to really get any kind of efficient solar panel usage as it was. But now with this flat or proposed flat area, we can really support the building tremendously with a very large solar array on the top of the building. This were the current drawings, and in that middle section on the top, you can kind of see where it has some vertical lines. That's that awning that kind of fills in and kind of shields. I think it was originally meant to hide mechanical equipment that was behind it. And in our newest plan, the biggest part is just filling that in. So it doesn't look that much different in the current scheme, where we put glass in that section and roof over that entire area. That's basically what the infill is in that along Columbia Road. This is actually a kind of since it's a building along both Mozart Place and its rear, it's kind of catching both sides of the building in this particular image from the original architect. But it shows it sort of that 2.5 stories on the left side of the picture and the 3 stories on the right where the turret is. And what we're doing in the new scheme is taking that basic thing, keeping it more or less the same. We've added, or we hope to add, these awnings that act also as solar panels over the windows that are there, and then we've added some glass on the top. In the course of doing that, it was my hope to make that side, which is really the south exposure, it gets a lot of sun on that side, and those are very large windows. They don't appear to be in this image, but they're pretty large. And by shading them, it was my intention to be able to shade both the windows and get more energy by having these solar awnings out there. Again, another image showing how it looks closer to along Mozart Street. Doesn't have a lot of impact, I don't think, but you can see that upper section where it's both open on the left side, but roofed over. And then above that is where all of the solar panels would be located on the roof. This is just a kind of a building section kind of showing you that it's partly in the ground. There's parking underneath the building where we plan to have also a bike storage in the course of doing what we're doing. And it's showing you really where the solar panels are located on the top and on, you can see it on the right side of the building. All right. I think that's, unless there's questions architecturally, we can head back to Kyle. You can take it from here, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just pass the baton right on to Shirley.
Sure. Just to piggyback on the architectural and reconfiguration scope that Terry went over, we just kind of sort of going over what those energy efficient measures entail. And going back to Terry's point about that inefficient entrance, we now have a vestibule that is enclosed, that's insulated, and it's a glass sliding door that's going to be able to make this entrance much more efficient. And in addition to that, they'll be able to have a controlled access control, because right now the building is just open, where they'll be able to identify who's coming in, who's going out, make sure that the space is more secured. The HVAC system will be replaced with a new variable refrigerant, we call it VRF. It's a variable refrigerant flow system that has also a DOAS unit, which is the dedicated outside air handling system, and heat recovery. This is the sophisticated, this is the Cadillac of mechanical systems. And really it's just gonna make for a much more efficient environment, both in the building and outside as well. Gas has been limited to just a domestic water heater, so it's going to be all electric. We're going to also have low flow water sense fixtures, which is pretty commonplace these days, but that still really bodes well for sustainability and more efficient systems. LED lighting will be included on all floors, motion sensors. We're looking at exploring maybe even programmable dimmers that can really go a little further with managing the lighting for various offices, so on and so forth. And then finally, I think one of the most unique aspects of this project, because of the current roof structure, with the proposed build out of that existing roof deck, you'll now have expanded solar array that can really increase the efficiency and reduction in energy costs and savings by an additional 15, maybe even 20%. We have energy engineers who've been working with us who have been pretty conservative in their forecasting, but that's the right approach. But we really believe they'll be able to fare even better than the numbers that we have here, but we prefer to take a conservative approach. And so all of this will bode well for the Festival Center and for those who'll be operating and using the building.
Great, thanks, Shirley. So this is just a quick roadmap of where we are and where we're going. We, as we talked about in the beginning, we initially talked to this committee back in November. Since then, we took away input. We put together the application, submitted it. We've met with planning, who's reviewing the application as well concurrently with this. We plan to submit a pre-hearing statement prior to our April hearing, which will include, any additional feedback and outreach that we've received from community such as yourselves, neighborhood associations, letters of support, etc. And then at that point, we'll also submit anything else that needs to go in to complete the file. And then you guys will get a copy of that, so will the Office of Planning will get planning's report in and go to the hearing. Just to recap, or to make sure we're all on the same page for the exact variance requested, Graham, if you want to advance a slide. It's basically a two-part request. The first is that there's going to be more non-residential space density at the site than would otherwise be permitted. We're asking for 18,222 square feet, which is a floor area ratio of 2.3, and 15% more than what would otherwise be permitted, or 2,398 square feet more. The other part of it, as Terry alluded to, was continued non-residential use of the third floor, which under applicable zoning would not be permitted. Only the first two floors of non-residential use would be permitted, even though this building, as we've discussed, was originally constructed and permitted for 3 floors of non-residential use and continues to be operated as such. Next slide. I guess we can, at this point, that's what we put together for the group, and we can open it up to questions, and I'll try my best to play quarterback and direct to the experts as applicable.
Great, thank you, Kyle, and thanks to quite the team you brought out here. Commissioners, do you have any questions on this project?
I think it's great, the solar panels and everything, that it's great that you're able to, make use of the full roof for that. I think that's a great plan. I don't think I have any specific questions right now.
I'd like to just hear questions from the audience, then perhaps we can turn it back to commissioners. Thanks, Commissioner Gold.
Sure. One question I had, and apologies if I just missed this, but how long will this project take? Sort of what's your timeline? And will there be a significant impact at all on sidewalk access on Columbia Road? To no fault of your own, of course, the neighboring property has been under construction for quite some time. And so, just as they are about to be finished, you're going to start this up, which is your right to do. And obviously this is a great project. I'm just wondering what the timeline looks like.
So we're between a 12 and, I'd say 12 months, 12 to 14. We're trying to really, we have the extra 2 months worst case, but really trying to get this done within 12 months. The majority of the work, as you notice, is really in the interior of the building, unlike the building across the street where you really are going with vertical construction ground up. This really is going to be confined to the interior. The nice thing about this project as well is there's a parking lot in the back, in the rear, which allows us from a logistical standpoint and from being able to really, particularly for the mechanical units that are going to have to be installed in the roof, will need to have a crane. I think that's the extent of disturbance, if any, and that can be done. We'll try our best to make sure that is coordinated from the back parking area. And so having that space is a plus. And so that's where most of the maneuvering of heavy construction components that need to go into the building will be unloading or offloading from the rear. So I don't envision any real need to close off the Columbia Road sidewalk, just because the lion's share of the work is in the interior of the building and on the upper floor. Exactly.
Great. If there are members of the community who have questions, please use the raise hand function. While folks are raising their hand, I'll ask a question out of the chat preemptively, and that's, do you have any intent to go for a LEED certification with this, or is there anything you're looking at given the amount of solar panels and such?
Well, we explored that option with Bill and team. We worked with, talked to DCSEU and DC Department of Environment, spoke to some consultants, and it unfortunately was not feasible just because of the sheer cost of burden on the project. We explored what that would mean, whether they could really finance it, and it was really exorbitantly high, unfortunately. And we opted to go with the general requirements, the DCRA building requirements, which is pretty stringent. It's surprising that it doesn't meet goal, LEED, because it's very stringent. It's very comparable, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shirley, but there's the initial sort of inspection and processing fees for LEED, but then there's also like ongoing recurring costs. And what you're delivering as a system, and Terry can also weigh in on this, is actually, again, to your point, like essentially comparable to what you would be putting in a LEED certified building. You're just not paying for the sticker. You're not paying for the brand. Yeah, you're doing the improvement because it pencils out for the project and for the ownership at the festival center.
Yeah, it's just the financial.
Yeah.
All right, we have a question from Mr. Hughes. I believe you've been unmuted.
Yeah, why do, go ahead.
Thank you for taking my question. You may have covered this at the beginning of the presentation, but could you, if so, just restate why do you need more residential space, non-residential space than was originally configured? And is this all going to be used by nonprofit purposes, or is it going to be commercial?
Shirley, do you want to handle that one?
Bill, you want me to handle that, or?
Well, I can just jump in and say that, as I think as Shirley mentioned at the beginning, I mean, the poor configuration right now of our space really limits the number of organizations that we can serve. So this will greatly, we'll be able to greatly expand the number of folks that we can serve. And our goal is to really focus on, our mission is to focus on serving nonprofits, faith communities, and justice organizations.
And it would be all commercial to I think your last question.
Well, it would be rentable by the festival center supported allies, which you have multiple long-term tenants, Jubilee Housing, you have the Avis Morgan BID, right? Like there are some fixtures and others that are fledgling and growing and expanding. So their needs and the demand for that space has been growing over time.
Well said.
Terry, I think I allowed you to speak if you had something to add.
Yes, about the energy, basically Kyle hit the nail on the head that it was just the cost of having a LEED certification because of not just qualifying for LEED, but the maintenance of those things over time and having it certified across time, that the decision was made not to go forward with claiming that it's a silver or whatever LEED certification, but it is actually the intention of the building was to be highly energy efficient without, say, the name or the label.
Sure. Other questions or comments from commissioners or from members of the community? I think whoever has the who's sharing their screen, if you could just take that down so you can get a better view of everyone. Awesome, thanks. I think it was Graham. All right, if there's nothing else, I move to recommend that the full ANC support a variance for the Festival Center at 1640 Columbia Road. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Awesome. So hearing all in favor, the motion passes, and this will be before the full ANC at the beginning of next month. I'm really glad you came out last time. I'm glad you came out this time. As someone who walks by the Festival Center on a daily basis. I did not know what it was prior, so this has been a great opportunity, learning opportunity for me as well. I know that there are 5 of the commissioners are on this call, so we obviously hope you the team joins us for the meeting, but we shouldn't plan for as in-depth presentation. Hopefully, just be there to quick overview and any questions from the community. But you guys are doing great work, and thank you.
Noted. And thank
Thank
you
you
for your time, and thank you everyone who on the
Thank
team.
you.
There's a
Feel
team
free to
effort for
so
stop
sure.
much,
by
everybody.
anytime.
Thanks.
Awesome.
right.
So moving on, I'd like to say thank you to Commissioner Faulkner for leading this ANC's exploration of the impact on our community from proposed WMATA changes. Terry, I think your dog is barking. Okay, good. Commissioner Faulkner, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Commissioner Gold. We spoke about this at the January meeting, and then we tabled because WMATA had not yet released their process for budget feedback on the budget, public comment on the budget. I can briefly go over sort of what some of the effects would be, just very briefly, which is that the current budget is sort of keeps a lot of the current service through the first 6 months of the next fiscal year, which would be July through December. But then from January to June 2022, it would make a lot of cuts, including changing the rail time to 30-minute headways, so 30-minute gaps between trains, I believe across the board, 7 days a week, and closing earlier. Including, and then as well on bus routes, there would be the elimination of some bus routes or some sections of routes that serve Adams Morgan, like the 96, and reductions in service frequency on some of the 16th Street buses. So, if the current plan goes ahead, it would really drastically affect public transit in Adams Morgan. This is aimed at, encouraging WMATA to think through some of that and potentially think through smoothing some of the impacts, because they are pretty drastic cuts. About a year from now, they would be pretty significant cuts to, I believe, 30% of pre-pandemic service, which is obviously just, a significant change. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions or thoughts.
I think you're actually absolutely hitting it on the head, and I would say that the proposed, we sort of had this conversation last month, but the proposed cuts for the second half of the fiscal year, which as of last month were for the entire fiscal year, but the proposed cuts basically make the transit network non-functional, right? Commuters having to wait 30 minutes for a train, and then obviously that train is going to be overcrowded. The same thing for buses in our system. As someone who very much supports the use of transit, I think that we should be taking this opportunity to increase service, especially as you note in our neighborhood, which is very transit oriented. I think do you want to introduce the resolution, or do you move to consider it?
Yeah, I move to consider the resolution on proposed FY 2022 WMATA operations. Can I get a second?
I second that.
Great.
Do you want to, Commissioner Faulkner, maybe just walk through the language of the resolves and, maybe outline what the goal of each is?
Yeah, so there's 4 resolves. One that basically say we object to the plan to cut rail and bus service so drastically, especially at a time when demand is likely to be growing, and that that transit is even more important for people. we are asking them specifically to consider the importance of bus access in places like Adams Morgan, where we don't have a metro system within our neighborhood, a metro stop within our neighborhood. And so, eliminating certain bus lines and changing frequency could have a serious impact. We are urging them to consider shifting funding to smooth the impact from service cuts, if possible. I think also rethinking shifting funding within the year. If I think the 6 month of somewhat normal for now, and then super drastic cuts is questionable, I think. And then also just urging the DC government to direct its appointees to the WMATA board to sort of focus on prioritizing widespread service and preserving workable service. Because as you said, I think that the proposed plan for a year from now is just really really calls into question whether it's even a functional transit network.
Yeah, and I think that, there's a note from Kristen Barden about indications about federal relief for WMATA, and that would be additional federal relief versus current, because what they recently received, I guess, at the end of the year, beginning of the year, is what allowed them to have a quote unquote normal first half of the fiscal year. And obviously we want to see that they are hoping, and that's sort of what I'm wondering is this a worst case scenario budget that really they're showing if we don't get relief, we basically don't have a transit system in the nation's capital. One question I had, Commissioner Faulkner, was about the third resolved. I'm not familiar. Is it your understanding that there is, I guess, additional or a surplus in the second half of the ongoing FY that they could move that to next year, or where's that coming from?
I guess I'm not certain on. I don't believe there's a surplus. I guess my sort of thinking behind that was that current demand is lower, especially on rail. I think bus demand is still is not obviously pre-pandemic levels, but current demand is lower, and obviously with vaccines and everything, in 6 months and a year from now, we expect it to be higher. And so rethinking the sort of drastic cuts when we're more than likely people will be commuting more and people will be, using transit even more than they are currently. But I don't.
So the point that you're making is sort of reduce service now even further than it currently is, so that it to not be reduced later.
I guess potentially, or at least think of that is I guess I think anything to, like, if we have to reduce service by X amount and smoothing that over a year, the next year and a half, rather than keeping it as it is and then such a drastic cut. I think, a 10% reduction in service now, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Just two things to note, I think, in your language, and I appreciate JI's catch of this. I think that the S1 has already been cut, which is sad for me because that's the direction I go when I take the S buses down. But I'll take the sacrifice. But then also that the H2 will be rerouted to Columbia Road, but the H4 will continue through Mount Pleasant. Just something to think about.
I have updated those things. Yeah, I will say all of WMATA's color-coded tables do make it a little difficult.
Yeah, I'm gonna yield. Commissioner Ronnie, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm glad that we're bringing this back, and that Commissioner Faulkner has diligently put this together, and we know we've been exchanging some emails and keeping an eye on this. So glad to see it back.
Great. If there are members of the community who have any input, that would be welcome. And I know that I haven't been able to keep the closest eye on the chat. So if you've written something down and want to say it out loud, please feel free to raise your hand. While folks are raising their hand, one of the questions that I was thinking about, commissioners, is how the proposed changes specifically impact our neighborhood. And I was thinking about if the L2 is removed entirely, and that the expectation is that folks who are traveling southbound from Adams Morgan would take the 42 or 43, and folks traveling northbound would take the H2. So that then creates Adams Morgan as the transfer point for someone who would otherwise ride the L2 all the way northbound. And that creates some logistical issues in terms of, right, if you're going northbound, the 42 would drop you off at the southwest corner of 18th and Columbia in front of SunTrust Plaza. And the H2 would pick you up catty corner to that across a sizable intersection at the intersection of Adams Mill and Columbia. And so it's sort of that directioning would require some guidance from WMATA. I don't know if those bus stands would require more, being bigger to handle more traffic. Those are just things that I was thinking about. I don't know if any of you or any community members have thoughts on that. No? Cool. That's fine. All right. Last chance for any community input or other commissioners on this resolution.
I don't. Before you get to, I wanted to note that Kristen's been saying in the chat that if you could include language about equity.
Yeah, I don't know if there's specific, there is language in here about, folks needing to commute to work, which I think she mentioned, as well as having a disparate impact on, lower wage earners and folks. I don't know if there's specific additional language around that.
Yeah, in the resolution, do you, or in your background reading, have you come across any ongoing surveys in terms of the populations that are currently using the bus? Because my understanding is that bus service is not terribly down compared to rail service, because rail service was primarily white collar commuters, and the bus is, more essential workers are taking the bus and they have to go to work. And so I don't know if you've come across that in your looking into this resolution.
Yeah, I haven't. I believe the number is bus service is down, but it's not down by nearly as much as rail or bus use ridership. Yeah, that's certainly my understanding, is that, and that's in part, and I could potentially, I think there's a point about, the folks who need transit the most, and then a point about the bus in particular. But yeah, that's certainly a point that I think the bus service in particular is vital to folks who don't have other sources of transportation.
Right, and I know, and this was a good point from Kristen as well, that I know previously the ANC has considered the changing of hours of Metro Bus and Metro Rail, and now is a bit of a different time, but hopefully come the second half of this fiscal year, of next fiscal year, we're going to be in a more normal time, and the essential workers or the staff of many Adams Morgan businesses will be going and coming from work at hours that are not 9 p.m. So those are certainly things to think about. We have a comment from the phone number 411. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Dennis James calling in. How's it going, everybody? I strongly support almost everything in the resolution. I sent you, the 3 committee members, an email, and I don't know if you had a chance to see it. I had a little bit of a quibble about the second whereas, where I feel like it's not really necessary to disdain the part, auto users, because as I've tried to point out, auto users are also metro users and bus users. And I am frequently, in normal times, not now, but, so why limit the totality of the people who could be included in that second whereas? Significant, well, I'm not sure that you can say also the significant majority of residents, perhaps that's proven out in some census form or something, but I don't think we can know about the workers and visitors as to whether they own or cannot afford or do not choose to use a personal vehicle. Yeah. So it just seems like that kind of is an unnecessary thing. So I suggested a change, whereas Adams Morgan is a centrally located neighborhood with, well, not with there, centrally located neighborhood, densely populated with significant commercial, cultural, and entertainment areas whose users depend heavily upon transit. Anyway, that's my suggestion.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, and it gave me the opportunity to go and look at that email. That seems to make sense to me. Commissioner Faulkner, would it, if we were to simply say this is a broadly, with all that descriptive language, this is a community with all these users who are dependent on rail to get to and from the, are dependent on transit to get to and from. Does that make sense to you? Or I mean, you wrote this, so I don't want to the Mr. James to think that I was the one that put that in, but also if you have a particular reason you included that, I'm happy to consider that.
I am open to that change, and I will say I must admit that some of this language was actually drawn from a previous resolution around metro access, since it was describing Adams Morgan's dependence on transit. So I believe I modified some of that, but some of that was not a choice that I made intentionally. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's good to say. Thank you for pointing that out. I think it's good to say that we are dependent on transit, and obviously the more transit there is, the less those of us who have cars need to use them, and don't have cars need to buy them. So I think broadly saying that the neighborhood is dependent on transit, and that's a good consideration to have.
Well, that'd be great if I don't expect you to just make the change on the spot. If you can, that's great. But if you wanted to massage it between now and the meeting, I don't think it changes dramatically the overall intent of the resolution. But I'm not being overly demanding here. But thanks for the positive feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting us know. J.I.
So I wanted to also point out that the changes also include eliminating the D30 series buses that provide, as far as I'm aware, a fair amount of school runs. And so, as the city is talking about reopening schools and having kids going back to school, is WMATA then turning to those students and saying, sorry, you're on your own for actually getting there and back? Or are we going to be asked to, expect more and more parents to be driving their kids to school through our neighborhood? So I think, including that as well, not to mention, elimination of the service, on both the 96 and the H series buses to Tenleytown means that any American University or, Washington Seminary students who might want to use the bus to get to school and back will now, have a much more difficult time. So I think, adding that in as well could be worth mentioning. And then I had a comment in the chat also that, I think it is worth noting, responding to the previous comment, that I think it is worth noting that, it's not just that people in the neighborhood or people who work in the neighborhood choose to use the bus. Many don't have, don't have the ability to use a personal car. It's not just a choice.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, because I'm unfamiliar with the D30s, and broadly, we should think more holistically about children going back to school. But do those buses run through ANC 1C, just for information's sake?
I believe I'm not super familiar with them either. I did look at their route maps earlier today, and I believe a couple of them do at least cut through, across the park or up Columbia Road and end at Columbia Heights Station, and then a couple others, cross at Military Road and come down 16th Street.
So, commissioners, without going through the language right now, how do we feel about adding a resolved on thoughts about the crosstown service of getting to of our neighbors or neighbors passing through to get it to Tenleytown, of the impact of the or the use of the bus as a school bus? Are those things that we should add to this resolution? Thoughts on that, Commissioner Faulkner?
Yeah, I am certainly open to that. I think that's something I hadn't been really thinking about, but that is a good, a good point. Yeah, I'm open to that. I don't know if it makes sense to wordsmith the language now or potentially add it later, but that makes sense to me.
I know that especially with regard to the 18th Street closing, that some folks have been, talking to bus riders on 18th Street already. So maybe it would be worth, I know Heather Foote has been heavily involved. Maybe she can help figure out, how many of those folks, ride or would ride to the western ends of those routes, and how many people are going to be affected. Because I can certainly look at a map and say, how I could see this being affecting people, but I don't actually know how many people in any real way. But yes, the lack of further degradation of crosstown service, I think, is a significant problem.
Thank you for those comments. Any other input from commissioners or community members? I know it seems like a number of commissioners on the line. If any of you have thoughts on this, or just scoping out what's on tap for next month. Okay, so I think at this point, Commissioner Faulkner, I think we should move this resolution as amended with some kinks to work out on the specific language of those amendments. But I think that either we can sort of figure out that language between now and the full ANC meeting and propose formal amendments at the ANC meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep, that sounds good to me.
I'll take that as a second.
Yes, second.
Okay, all in favor of recommending the full ANC adopt this resolution as recommended, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, in that case, the resolution passes this committee, and we will take this matter up for consideration at the full ANC at the beginning of March. Cool.
Fantastic. Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Commissioner. Last up tonight, Kristen Barden will speak briefly about an opportunity to host part of the 2021 Cherry Blossom Festival here in our neighborhood. Kristen, the floor is yours.
All right, great. I think I was just elevated to panelist, I think. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I think you have all seen the 2-pager that the Cherry Blossom Festival is distributing. So we were approached as a potential site to host one of the 25 giant cherry blossom sculptures. They are trying to put 2 of them in each ward of the city. And I think you have the, I can try to pull up and share my screen if people want to see the 2-pager.
I think this is it here.
Do you have it? Okay. All right, great. So, so the Cherry Blossom Festival is paying for the sculpture, they're paying for the maintenance, they're paying for the insurance, they're paying for everything, really. So this is a really easy lift for us. And we've been talking with DDOT because we offered to apply for the public space permit for BB&T Plaza to locate it. And DDOT actually now wants to do one permit for all of them throughout the city. So we are now no longer going to be involved with the permitting process, which is fine. You know, it's really, they really want the Cherry Blossom Festival to apply for the permit for all of their proposed locations. So we think this would be a great amenity for the plaza. They anticipate that they will install them sometime the week of March 13th throughout that week. They would have them all installed probably by March 20th. And they would be there until the end of May. And they're going to auction them off. So some of them, if they get purchased before the end of May, might disappear before that. You know, if the purchasers, want, that particular one before that, they might deliver them before that. So, but the latest that they would be the sculpture would be there would be the end of May. So it's a temporary installation. It's free to us. And I think it could be really cool. They are, as you can see, they're about 4 feet high. So they're obviously, you can sit in it. They're very, very heavy. So the likelihood of anybody trying to move it is not likely. I think they're over 1,000 pounds. It's perfect for that location. And I don't think, people would try to move it when it's that heavy. So actually it's just over 5 feet tall. Sorry, I misspoke. So anyhow, I think it's a great opportunity to get one of these in the plaza. I wanted to make sure that folks had an opportunity to ask questions about it if there were any concerns. Our clean team and our safety ambassador will keep an eye on them, on it, of course, through their daily work. But the festival is actually responsible for the maintenance. So if there is any damage to it or graffiti or whatever, we will notify them and they will come out and take care of it so that the sculpture is not damaged by any of that. So they don't want us to clean it. They, want to take care of that themselves. So to preserve the art because of, like I said, they're going to be auctioned off. So yeah, so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Kristen. Just, I know it's in our agenda, but just because you kept saying the plaza, so just to confirm for our community members, this is the BB&T Plaza at the intersection of Columbia Road and Adams Mill, the north east corner of the main intersection there at 18th.
Right, right. The DDOT, yeah, the DDOT Plaza. Yeah.
And it seems that this is actually smaller than the Christmas boxes that were up in the plaza. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's only 5 foot tall, and there's just one of these. I wanted to get multiple ones because I thought it would look better, but we can only get one. So I asked because I originally thought, oh, like a grouping of 3 would be really cool. And she's like, no, sorry, you can only have one. So yeah, so there's just one.
Great. Well, thank you for coming today to present this. Are there any questions from commissioners? Anything from the community? And Kristen, I assume that if anyone has questions, they're welcome to go your way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if I don't have the answer, I can get the answer from the Cherry Blossom Festival. They have been they brought this idea to us last week, so I'm sorry this was kind of last minute and added at the last minute, but I just found out about it last week. So, and they too apologized, you know, that they're kind of, you know, late in getting word out about this. I think the deadline for artist submissions slipped a little bit. So now, you know, the schedule for all of this is slipping a little, but I think it'd be really fun to have this in the neighborhood for a couple months. And I think people will engage with it, and it'll be fun.
I agree, and hopefully the Cherry Blossom Festival comes with some amount of normalcy, either that or a National Park Service shutting down the entire mall again, one or the other.
Yeah.
Great. Last chance for questions, anyone? This is a very straightforward presentation, and it seems like a great idea, so I understand why there aren't questions, but all right. Thank you, Kristen.
Sure. Yeah. If anybody has any, feel free to email me or call. And if I can't answer it, I'll get an answer from the Cherry Blossom Festival.
Great. And with that, we have reached the end of our agenda, and therefore I adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.